Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here today at all of our campuses, or to those of you watching online, we're glad you're joining in with us today. We're wrapping up the series, The Search for Happy. And, for several weeks, we've been learning about what it takes for you and I to live the happy life. And we've gotten all kinds of stuff out of this. We've learned a new definition for what a happy life really is. We've talked about habits that you can build into your life that will increase your joy and all of that stuff. And I don't have time to go through the entire series and recap it for you. I'd encourage you, if you haven't been here with us, to go back and go to our website, go to our Facebook page. We've got the messages there. You can catch up. I'd highly recommend you see this entire series. But today, here's what I want to do with you. I want us to look at one more, just a key practice that you just have to figure out. You have to master in your life if you're gonna live a happy, meaningful life, as we've been talking about. And here's some good news about what we're going to talk about today. The truth is, everybody can do this. I mean, there's not a single person here today who's not going to be able to take what we learn and put it into practice. It's not hard. It's not going to be something you have to figure out. I mean, you're going to completely understand it. So no matter how old you are, how young you are, you can do this, and you'll be able to immediately put it into practice. In fact, here's my promise to you. If you take what we learned today and you go out and you actually do it, I can 100% guarantee that if you do it, you're going to be happier than you were when you started. Now, how's that for an intro, right? In fact, we'll talk about that in a minute, and I'll actually prove it to you when we get to it. But here's what we're doing in case you hadn't been here. We've been looking at a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote. And it's in your Bible, and it's known as the book of Philippians because he wrote it to a church that was in a town called Philippi. And Paul talks about all throughout this book how to live a joyful life, what joy really is, and how it all plays out in life. And today we're going to look at, just start off really just looking at one verse out of the second chapter of Philippians. It's chapter 2, verse 14, and here's what it says. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Now, we can just stop right there because let me ask you a question. How are you doing on that? Seriously. How are you doing with that one commandment right there? Do everything. Not just some things, not even most things. He says, do every single stinking thing without complaining, without grumbling. See, a lot of people will come up to me and say, here's why I don't read the Bible. And they'll say something like this, I tried reading it, and I just don't understand it. And on some level, I understand that, but on other levels, I just don't get it. Because here's the problem with me. I'm more nervous about the stuff I do understand that I don't do. In fact, there's so much in the Bible that I completely understand. That's the part that scares me. It's not the parts that I don't understand that scare me. It's those parts that I really read and I go, yeah, I get that. I just ain't doing it. And this is an example right here. This is one of those things that I don't think I get right, not even some of the time. It's pretty much all of my life. Do everything without grumbling. In fact, if you were around here last year, I actually gave a talk, and we talked about this verse, and some of you will remember this. And what I did was, at the end of the message, I said, hey, here's a challenge. Everybody go out and let's declare a no complaint day. Some of you remember this already. What we decided to do was we were going to go out into our world and pick one day during the week, and we were just going to determine ourselves not to complain about anything, not to grumble about anything all day long. And you know what was funny about that was people talk to me about messages all the time after they're done and how they apply them and all that kind of stuff. I probably had more conversations about that one message than I did about anything else that I talked about all year long last year. Because people just kept coming up to me and going, this is so hard. I can't do it. And it was, for those of you that tried it, it's hard. I mean, a day without grumbling, think about that. I mean, it's easy to say. It's not so easy when you try it. I mean, think about it. Some of us figured out we couldn't even make it through breakfast, right? I mean, just think about a day without complaining, what that looks like. Like, for instance, tomorrow, when you wake up and that alarm clock wakes you up, you can't grumble, you can't complain. That first person you see, no grumbling, no complaining. When you look in the mirror tomorrow, no matter what you see in that mirror, no matter what it looks like, no grumbling. When you get in the car, when you drive to work, no matter what that car drives like, or no matter how junky it is. When you come and sit at your desk at school and your teacher gives you another assignment. When you're at home, when you eat, whatever it is you get to eat. When you get on the scale and you see the numbers, no complaining. When you see that first person and they're cranky and they're just ticked off at you, no complaining. When you sit down at work and your computer takes an extra 15 to 20 seconds to boot up, I mean, God forbid that it takes you an extra 15 or 20 seconds to have the entire world of knowledge at your fingertips. No complaining. When your cell phone coverage is just a little bit spotty, and for just a few brief moments, you are not in instant potential communication with any human being on the planet. No complaining. Whenever you can't find the remote, probably because your kid lost it, and you have to get up from the lazy boy, walk across the room, turn the TV on and off manually like they had to in the old days, before you go back and sit down in your lazy boy, no complaining. Right, think about it. Everything you do everything without grumbling. That's what Paul says. So, here's what I want to do. Let's talk about grumbling for a little bit. What is the whole deal with complaining and grumbling? What really is it? Now, here's the thing. It doesn't mean that you never point out something that's wrong. It doesn't mean that you never correct anybody or you don't fix anything that needs fixing. I mean, if you were to live that way, that's an unloving way to live. I mean, there are things that need to be corrected. There are things that need to be pointed out that are wrong and made right. I get all that. That's not what this is. This is something else. Grumbling's different. Here's what grumbling is. Here's what complaining is in you and in me. Complaining and grumbling is simply a reflection of a spirit in me, and it's the spirit of ingratitude. Grumbling or complaining is a reflection that I have a spirit of ingratitude, not being grateful. In fact, if you read in your Bible, you go to the Old Testament in the book of Numbers, you'll find 11 different times where the writer says that the people of Israel, these people of Israel, they were delivered from slavery, okay? They'd spent 400 years under slavery, injustice and oppression. God releases them from slavery. And 11 different times, you'll find that they were guilty of grumbling about what they had to eat or what they didn't have to eat, the comforts that they enjoyed or didn't enjoy, stuff that they weren't happy about. After all that God did, they continually grumbled and complained. In fact, this might shock some of you, but in the Bible, ingratitude is spoken of as a sin. It's a sin. God takes it really seriously. Look at the book of Romans. Here's Paul wrote this as well. He says, "For although they knew God, they didn't glorify him as God, and they didn't give thanks to him." There's that ingratitude. Their thinking became futile. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Paul gives another warning later on in his writings. He's talking to another church, the church of Corinth, in Corinth. He's in the book of Corinthians. And he gives pretty much the same warning as he does to the Philippians. But he's talking about the Israelites back in Moses' day. And here's what he says. He says, "Don't grumble like some of them did." And they got, what? Killed. Now, is God going to kill you for grumbling? Probably not. But anyway, the point I'm making is it's a big deal to God. It's evidently a big deal. So, since we're in this search for happiness and we're trying to figure out what it all means, I think it's important that we try and do this. But here's the thing. If I just stand up here and tell you, hey, go out and stop grumbling, that's not what this is. See, here's the thing. When Paul says do everything without grumbling, he doesn't mean, hey, go out into your world and keep a spirit of grumbling and dissatisfaction and just harbor all that, and you just keep it stuffed in. Don't say anything about it. Just keep it to yourself. Just don't talk about it. That's not what he means. I mean, come on. This is something else. I mean, if you did that, you'd be miserable, okay? That's not happiness at all. But when Paul says do everything without grumbling, he's talking about something else. Remember, grumbling is the result of a spirit of ingratitude. It's me and you not living with a sense of being grateful. So for me and you to do everything without grumbling, I have to start cultivating within myself a more grateful heart. And if I do that, I can begin to do what Paul talks about. Now, everybody wants to be grateful. I mean, that's something that I can pretty much assume about you. You want to be a grateful person, so do I. The question is, do you have a plan for that? My guess is you don't. Most of us don't. I don't. We don't even think about it. What's your plan for cultivating, becoming a more grateful person than you are today? Now, we're going to get to that in just a minute, but before we do, it's real important that we clear up some of the messed up thinking that a lot of us have about this whole issue when it comes to gratitude. See, here's what I bet most of you think. Now, you would never say this out loud, but this is what most of us think and believe inside of our heads and our hearts. We think, hey, you know what? I can be grateful, but I just need something to be grateful about, right? In other words, you'll say to yourself, the more good things I have, the more grateful then I'll become. Another way of saying this, and I think most of us would believe this even though we don't act on it or we don't say it out loud. We think that gratitude is the product of my circumstances, of what's going on around me. And if God really wants me to live a grateful life, then here's what God ought to do. God ought to start giving me more stuff so that I can be more grateful to Him. So if God would answer my prayers all the time, and if He would give me what I needed, what I wanted, whenever I needed it or wanted it, then I'd have a reason to be grateful, and I could be more grateful just like He wants me to be. Now, here's my pushback on that. The only reason that you and I think that way is because we don't spend a whole lot of time putting adult kind of thought into it. Because, see, here's the point. If you're a parent, you don't raise your child that way. You would never raise your kid that way. In fact, I don't know a single parent who has ever said this to their kid. Hey, listen, honey, I want you to be a grateful person. I want more than anything for you to grow up and just have a heart filled with gratitude. So, honey, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you everything you want. In fact, if there's anything you want or anything you desire, you just tell Mom, you just tell Dad, and I'll give it to you. Every desire you have, you just tell me. Mom and Dad will take care of that. You don't raise your kid that way. No. In fact, if you do ever find a child who is raised that way, what do you call them? Spoiled, right? I mean, we call that kid not grateful. Spoiled. Think about that word, spoiled. That means like ruined, good for nothing. See, increased gratitude is not a result of increased gratification. I'll say that again. Increased gratitude does not come from increased gratification. In fact, it's actually the other way around. And in this letter we're looking at, Paul doesn't want them to misunderstand where gratitude comes from. In fact, towards the end of Philippians, he talks about this. I want to read this to you. Philippians chapter 4, starting with verse 11. He says this. He says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. But I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether I'm well-fed or I'm hungry, whether I'm living in plenty or in want. I can do everything. In other words, I can do all of this stuff that I just talked about, being content, being at peace, being joyful, through Christ, through Him, who gives me strength. Paul says, contentment or gratitude for this life. He said, it's not something that I experience just because I get what I want. If I get enough gratification, if my circumstances go the way I want them to. He says, no, contentment is a learned skill. It's something that I have to practice. I have to really work at it. He says, it's an acquired mindset. Notice he says, I have learned the secret of being that way, of being content. And see, that brings us to one of probably the greatest paradoxes of this whole gratitude thing. And you know this is true. Think about it. Isn't it true that most often it's the people who have the least who wind up being the most grateful, and the people who have the most or are given the most wind up being the least grateful? I mean, you know that's true. Very often, the people who wind up with the most stuff or who get most things going their way, they end up with an ungrateful spirit, an ungrateful heart. But people who are the opposite, who don't get everything that they want or they need, they tend to be the most grateful people there are. Now, why do you think that is? It's interesting. There was a researcher from Harvard, and he's one of those guys that study things, and he was studying this whole topic of happiness and contentment in people. And he tells a story about he went to South Africa to speak to a school of children, and he said he stood up in front of this classroom of kids, and as you would want to do, he said, I wanted to connect with them. I wanted to find something that would be something that we would all hold in common. And he said, so I thought through of what all school children would hold in common so I could relate to them, and I thought, I know, it's the hatred of schoolwork. I mean, what kid who goes to school doesn't hate to do schoolwork? And so he stands up in front of this crowd of kids and he says, hey kids, how many of you hate, or how many of you just love doing schoolwork, right? He said immediately 95% of the hands in the class went up, and those kids went, ooh, I love schoolwork, me. I mean, they just couldn't get enough of it. And he said at that moment, he said, I realized something. He said, what my kids and what your kids and what the kids in our country see as a burden, these kids who have so much less. I mean, he was in a village of kids where they struggled for food. They struggled to have, they hardly had any electricity. They had to struggle to get their water every day. And here are these kids. What our kids see as a burden, they saw as a gift. He said they raised their hands and they said, oh, I love to learn. I get to read, I get to discover, I get to write papers, I get to be tested on all this stuff to find out if I've learned. It was as if they were saying, I will have doors open to me that my parents did not have, and I'm so glad, I'm so thankful. Think about that. Same question. You go into a classroom around here and ask that question, you're going to get a completely different answer. It's the same question, but completely different answers. One group grumbles about it. The other group says, I am grateful for it. So the point is this. It's not your situation. It's not your circumstances that will make you grateful. There's something else. I mean, think about it. How can two people sit in the midst of the same circumstance, and one of them is filled with gratitude for it, the other one sits around and complains and grumbles? I'll tell you why that's true. It's because what some people perceive as being a right, other people perceive as being a gift. And for me to be grateful, here's the key. I have to begin to look at my life differently. I have to begin to see everything that I have as a gift I didn't deserve. Because as long as I think I'm entitled to anything, then I'll never experience gratitude for that thing. If it's an entitlement, I'm not grateful. If it's a gift, I see it completely different. Gratitude means that I look at all the good that comes into my life and I have a different perspective. I become grateful to the person who gave me that gift. See, the Jewish nation, the people of Israel, they were very serious about this. They came up with interesting ways and they trained themselves for this gratitude thing. They had all kinds of ways of doing that. And they built it into their prayers. In fact, when you're a kid in our culture, you're taught prayers as a little child. Like I was taught prayers and came up with them by memory, and you just sort of say them out loud. Like for instance, every kid that grows up learning, God is great, God is good, let us thank him for our food. I mean, everybody learned that one. When I was a kid, I had a friend of mine, we sat down to eat, and we were little kids, and he said, rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, yay, God. And that was his prayer. I mean, it's silly, but the truth is that's the way a lot of us learn to pray. We just say, thanks, God, and we just move on, and it becomes just words that we say. For the people of Israel, it was different. They built this into every meal. They had different blessings for different portions of the meal or different foods. For example, they would sit down to a meal, and someone would bring in a plate of grapes. Well, the Jewish people would stop in the middle, and they would just pray right there for that thing. In fact, they would say something like this. They'd say, blessed art thou, O God, who thought up grapes. What a fabulous thing that grapes are. Thank you, God, because you made grapes. And then somebody would bring in another course, and they'd bring like bread to the table. And they would stop, and they would say, blessed art thou, O God, for bread. God, you thought up bread. Thank you for the resources that it took to make this bread. What a blessed idea that was. God, thank you for bread. And then somebody would bring in another course, and they'd put a plate of Brussels sprouts down, and they would say, well, they wouldn't say anything because nobody would be thankful for that. But anyway, here's what they were trying to do. It was a way that they were cultivating gratitude into their lives. They began to learn how to see every bite of every piece of food that they ate as a gift from God, a gift from heaven. And the rabbis of ancient Israel actually would fight over this. They would try to see who can be the most grateful. what a contest, They would say, how can I not just, for instance, thank God for the rain? How can I thank God for every single drop of rain? And they would say prayers for every drop, and it was kind of silly. But whenever we go through bouts of rain, it always cracks me up. I mean, think about it. Just to compare to the way they think of it. We go through a season in our culture where it rains all the time, and it just won't stop raining. What do people do? We complain about the rain. Oh, I wish it would stop raining. I'm sick of this rain. And what's interesting is we'll get through that, and then we'll come into a period of drought, and we won't see the rain. And people start praying for rain, and every little shower that we see, people are so thankful for the rain. It's the same thing. One moment we're grumbling about it, the other moment we're grateful for it. Why? It's like in moments when we don't have it, we come to our senses and we realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm not entitled to the rain. It's a gift from God, and I should be grateful for it. See, when I'm grateful, I recognize that I have received something to which I wasn't entitled. I didn't deserve it. Because, see, entitlement will always kill gratitude. And that's why we have to, that's why more than any other culture ever has, we have more stuff, and yet we have the least amount of gratitude. Isn't that how we are? When I get, think about this, when you get something for the first time, you're grateful for it. You get it the second time, and you kind of expected it. You get it the third time, and now you're entitled to it. And then you get mad, and you feel like your rights are violated if you don't get it the next time. Isn't that in you? It's in me. I think it's in all of us. There's this really great story from the life of Jesus. I'll read this to you. It's from the book of Luke, chapter 17. Look at what happens. It says, Jesus was going into a village, and 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance, and they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice, and he threw himself at Jesus' feet, and he thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, were not all 10 of you cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except for this foreigner? And then he said to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. Now this brings out a whole other part of gratitude that I think is important for us to get clear. It goes right at the heart of what I think is one of the big problems when we do this. I guarantee you, if you were to go and put yourself in the middle of that story, those 10 guys who had leprosy, they had been cut off from their families, cut off from real life. They were healed. They got their lives back. They were able to see their families again, to go back home, which they probably hadn't been to in years. All 10 of them were healed. And if you were to stop them on that road and ask those 9 that didn't go back to talk to Jesus and say, are you grateful for what Jesus did for you? I guarantee you every single one of them would say, well, of course I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. I can't be more grateful than for what has been done to me. They felt an immense amount of gratitude. But only one turned around. Only one of them would take the time to go back and not just come back, but throw himself at the feet of Jesus and say, Jesus, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, what's the point of that? Here's the point. There's a huge difference between you and me feeling gratitude and expressing gratitude. See, here's the thing. Nobody thinks they're guilty of being ungrateful. Nobody. Everybody thinks that they're grateful. Everybody will admit that I've lied before and I've cheated before and I've done things wrong. Nobody will ever admit to being ungrateful. But everybody here is probably more ungrateful than you think you are. Me too. And one of the reasons is that when somebody comes to me and they say something like, well, I think you're just being ungrateful. You know what immediately I'll say? And I'll bet you do this too. You'll say, I'm not ungrateful. I feel tremendous amounts of gratitude for what people do for me. I'm so grateful on the inside. I feel grateful. I think you're wrong. You don't know me. You don't know what's going on the inside of my heart. Because I don't want to say it, I don't want to get credit for being a grateful person. But the truth is, I'm grateful because I feel it. Andy Stanley, great speaker, puts it this way. This is his quote. He says, "The problem is that people in your life experience unexpressed gratitude as ingratitude." In other words, the people around you, in your marriage, in your family, your friends, the people you work with, it's like this. Your spouse or your friend or whoever, they do you a favor. They fix you a meal. They run an errand for you. And if someone were to ask you after they did that, "Are you grateful for that?" You say, "Of course I'm grateful." But if you don't express that to the person, then what they do is they experience that lack of you expressing it as ingratitude. They experience it as rejection. It's almost like saying this. It's almost like gratitude isn't gratitude until you express it. It doesn't become real to another person because when gratitude goes silent, that person fills in the blanks. And we always fill in the blanks with the worst. We fill it in with ingratitude. And here's the other side of it. The gratitude that you do feel when someone does something for you or you experience something as a gift, the gratitude you feel doesn't become real until you express it. And it turns out the best way to experience more gratitude and to experience happiness, which is where we're going with this, is for you to learn to be a person who expresses gratitude more and more and more. In fact, it's a proven scientific fact that people who express gratitude as a regular part of their life experience more happiness. In fact, here's what I want to do. I want to prove this to you by showing it to you. I want you to watch a video for just the next few minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll talk to you about what we're going to do next.
What makes you happy? Having fun? Hanging out with friends? Delicious food? Making money? Well, consider this. Psychologists have scientifically proven that one of the greatest contributing factors to overall happiness in your life is how much gratitude you show. Yeah? Think about that. Go ahead and marinate on it for a second. You can thank me later if you want. It'll make you feel better according to this study. You go ahead and click on it and read it if you want. Or you can keep watching because we read it and we thought it might be fun to test out for ourselves. We gathered a selection of volunteers to act as our subjects. First, we gave them a test. They didn't know what we were looking for, but it gave us a pretty good idea of their current level of happiness. We asked them to close their eyes and think of somebody who was really influential in their life, somebody who did something really amazing or important for them. We had them write down as much as they could about why this person was so important. Now, a lot of them thought at this point the experiment was over, until we really put them on the spot and tried to get them to call that person and read what they wrote about them. We're going to have you call your mother.
Person is my sister, Erica. Friend of mine, Craig Ains.
Her name is Dora.
My college accounting instructor.
Really? Is this somebody you're still in touch with today?
No, I'm assuming that he's passed on.
I don't know a number by heart, dude. This is awful.
That's fine. I don't know my mom's number by heart.
If it's true that those who are gone on are looking down on us, maybe he read my chicken scratch.
Hey, sweetheart.
Hey, how you doing?
Yes.
You got a second? Where you at, in the hotel?
I am. I'm in the hotel. You scared me when you asked if I had a second if something's wrong.
No, I'm on like this little TV show, and they told me to talk about the person that influenced me the most, and I picked you, and they're making me call. They're making me call you.
Hi, you've reached Craig. I'm not here right now.
At the tone, please record your message.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Erica, it's me.
All right, so I got to read you this paragraph. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, sweetheart.
All right. The person that influenced me the most would be my mother, Marlo Dawson. She is a single mother of 2. She is a very hard worker and dedicated to her family.
Hey, Craig, this is Loie. This is going to be a funny little voicemail, so I hope you enjoy it.
I'm so sorry for calling you at 4 o'clock in the morning.
I have to read this to you, okay? And you can't say anything, or I don't know. You can respond, but I probably will just keep going. Okay?
Is everything okay?
Yes, but I have to read this out loud to you.
The person who has had the biggest impact on my life was my college accounting instructor. He had a joy and enthusiasm for his job like no other teacher I have ever known.
I love her to death, and she keeps me going with positive talk. She is a woman that knows what she wants and won't give up until it is achieved.
I have to say that's just wonderful.
I first met Craig on an independent feature film set in Whitefish, Montana. I recently have been sending Craig a lot of positive thoughts as he's suffered a series of health problems. Despite his medical problems, he's continued to work and take pleasure in the small things in life, like sitting quietly with his wife Janine on the porch.
Erica is my older sister and my best friend. Sometimes it even feels like we are twins. She's my #1 fan and my #1 supporter. She makes me happy because despite all my mistakes and my decisions, she still loves me no matter what.
Your friendship is everything. And you are one of the most important person in my life.
Even when she has a kid and many children, I will love her more than her kids. Okay, maybe not. I will never forget when she flew 3,000 miles at the drop of a phone call to save me from a breakup.
I'm being blessed by having a son like you. I love you. Why did you do that?
I don't know, because they made me do it.
Before we let them go, we gave our subjects one more happiness test. Now, we mixed up and rephrased the questions so they didn't know they were taking the same test twice. For those who took the time to actually write something down but couldn't make the phone call for whatever reason, we saw happiness increase between 2 and 4%. Good, but not exactly mind-blowing. Now, for those who actually picked up the phone and personally expressed their gratitude, we saw increases between 4 and 19%. So either way, expressing your gratitude will make you a happier person. But you want to know something really interesting? The person who experienced the biggest jump in happiness was the least happy person who walked in the door. What does that mean? That means if you're having a particularly tough time, trying this out will more likely have a greater impact on you. Trust me, I'm in a lab coat.
Remember at the beginning of this talk, I said to you, this is something that every single one of you is going to be able to do. And it's true. Every single one of us can do this if we just will. You and I can take that gratitude that we all feel for the people in our lives, for the things in our lives, and if we'll just express it to someone, it's a guarantee. You'll be happier. You'll experience happiness. So you can do this with God. And I want to challenge you, begin to practice this all throughout your day. You know, just make it a habit of saying, God, thank you for waking me up this morning. God, thanks for putting air in my lungs. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to give me life, but you did. Thank you that I had clothes in my closet, meals available to me when I wanted them. When I turned on the faucet, God, water came out. I had it. God, thank you that my body still mostly works okay. God, thank you that outside I can see that the sun came up again today, that the birds were still singing, that the trees were still growing. God, thank you that there are doctors and nurses and medicine that can take care of me. God, thank you for teachers who taught me, for the farmers who grew the stuff that I'm eating, for the people who fix things and write things and clean things. God, thank you for my church. Thank you for your word that teaches me how to live, the Spirit who guides me, for the cross that blesses me with mercy, mercy that I didn't deserve. God, thanks for the work that I get to do that gives my life meaning. Thank you that when my last day comes, God, my eyes are going to close, but when I open them, I'm going to see Jesus, and he's going to be with me, and my real life will finally begin. God, I have hope, and I didn't deserve that. It's a gift. I'm telling you, when you start to live that way, when you start to do that, you'll begin to see everything in your life, every moment, for what it really is. It's all a gift. And I didn't deserve it. I'm not entitled to it. But listen, don't just do this with God. We need to do this with the people who are all around us. Who's God calling you to thank this week? Is there somebody in your life you need to express gratitude? You haven't expressed gratitude to them in a long, long time. And if you haven't, I'm telling you, they will begin to perceive it as ingratitude. Are your parents still around? Are you blessed to still have your parents with you? How long has it been since you thanked them for what they've done? If you're married, look her in the eye, guys. Husbands, look your wife in the eye. Tell her how much you appreciate her. Tell her thank you. And you could say this however you want, however it comes natural to you. And I know what guys are thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, see, if I go home and do that, I at least can't do it today, because if I do it today, she's going to know that I did it just because you told me to, and she's not going to think it's genuine. So just give me a few days, let me wait a little bit, and then I'll spring it on her. Guys, let me just clue you in on something. She's going to know anyway. She's going to know that it wasn't your idea. Why? Because, guys, we don't have these ideas. We need people to tell us to do stuff, right? So, don't wait. If you feel gratitude for her, tell her. Express it to her. And don't wait. Do it now. Wives, tell your husbands. I mean, listen, humble yourself. Say it however you need to say it. For whoever you need to say it. Maybe for you it's a teacher who meant a lot to you. Maybe a mentor who brought you up. A sibling that you haven't expressed it to in a while. A good friend. Whoever it is. And I know for some of you this might be kind of hard. You know, it might take a little bit of courage for you to do it. But I'm telling you, trust me. You do this and you will be so full of joy you won't know what to do with it. And more, if you could just build this into your life and do everything without grumbling, that's what will happen. Because your expressions of gratitude will start reminding you, hey, my life is a gift. Everything I have, everyone in my life, every moment, it's a gift. And you will begin to do life without grumbling or complaining. So today, on the back of your connection card that was in your seat, you'll find that there's a few next steps that we're asking you to take. And I want to encourage you to check one of those boxes and just make a commitment. Why can't we just all do this week? All of us together. Let's make a commitment to ourselves. Let's make it to God that we're at least going to try this once this week. That you won't just feel gratitude, but that you'll begin to express it. You'll express gratitude to God. You'll express gratitude to someone in your life. And listen, if we do this together, you make that commitment, we'll pray for you as we do every single week, that you'll grow in this practice of being grateful. And not only that you'll experience the joy we've been talking about in this series. And again, we've already said this in the service, but if you're a guest here today, boy, are we sure glad you're here. We're honored that you're a part of our service today. And we hope you'll take one of these cards and fill it out and drop it in the offering when it comes around in a few minutes, and that you'll allow us to connect with you. We really do want to honor you and say thanks to you and express our gratitude for you being here. We also are hoping that you'll begin to take next steps in your spiritual journey and allow us to be a part of that you'll get connected and make friends here. We have groups available for that. You can let us know. We're hoping that you'll continue on your journey with us. And again, if it's your very first time, by just making this connection, we want to give you something. So on your way out the door, just stop by the information table, pick up one of those free books. It's just a great resource we want to bless you with that'll help you in your journey with God no matter where you are. We want to give that to you before you leave. We think it'll be a great help to you. Again, thanks for coming. Now for all of us, let's bow our heads and I'll pray. God, we feel so much gratitude so many times for the things in our lives and for the people in our lives, and God, for the things that you've done for us, but so often we just don't express it. God, I pray that you would build that and cultivate that heart of gratitude in us. Not that we would just feel it. God, we would express it to you, to the folks that you've put into our lives, for the gifts that you've given us. God, make this a week of gratitude so that we can do all things without grumbling or complaining. We pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.